Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our May 10th work session. Up first tonight, we have a special recognition for the Antietam Konica Watershed Alliance. So if you have someone here with us today, if you could join me. I think they did.
David Beiser is a board member with Aqua and past presidents, and is one of the, he said he's the last active of the founding members of the organization.
Well, thank you. Thanks for being here. And we do have a special recognition for you. For the Antietam Konica Watershed Alliance is an organization comprised of volunteers who are instrumental in raising awareness about the importance of preserving, protecting, and restoring our environment. Through various programs, volunteers of ACWA organize trash removal from streams and rivers, furnish and plant trees in our neighborhoods, lead annual Earth Day, Arbor Day activities, collect data for our street tree mapping program, organize sampling events where they study stream chemistry, insects, and temperature to track water health and identify problem areas. So the City of Hagerstown thanks you and your volunteers for their dedication and efforts in promoting a healthy environment. And I thank you guys for your partnership with our Youth Council for Earth Day, Arbor Day events this year. That was incredible
Some of those were from
turnout.
last year, and so they sort of knew what to do.
Yes, it was
And
exciting
a
to
little refresher,
see.
and bam, they were out there planting trees, so,
Yeah.
no, that's great, that's very rewarding, satisfying for us.
We appreciate all that you do. Would you like to say some things? Put you on the spot, sorry.
I looked it up before I came. We got our 501c3 status in 2007, so we were active just a little bit before then, but that's when we were official. And so since then, as it says, we've been doing what we can with 100% volunteer effort and all the collaboration and partnerships, and I know various people, kids, volunteer with the efforts throughout the years. It's really quite an extended group. So we might not see somebody for a year or two, and then they come back and volunteer for another effort. So it's been great, and the city park there, of course, is just amazing. Nice trees there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate all you do.
Susan Simons, good to be here.
If I could just say, our partnership with Aqua and getting their support and being able to partner with them is very valuable to us, especially as we try to meet the requirements of our MS4 stormwater permit. The tree planting that David's group has helped us with, the stream cleanup, all of those activities help to meet our requirements under the permit, and we're happy to partner with them and look forward to continued working with you.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. And you could grab a picture.
And here we go. Good smiles. 1, 2, 3. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
All right. Up next, we have a branding and imaging project update.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to give you all an update on where we're at with our branding and imaging project. The council awarded this contract to Guide Studios of Cleveland, Ohio earlier this year, and since that time, Guide has begun work. The original work that was done was the publishing of a perception survey that was made available to all city employees, to various mailing lists we have through economic development, as well as social media. They were very happy to see that we had over 1,000 respondents to that survey, of which they said a vast majority, and more than they're used to, seemed like very legitimate responses instead of more of the trolling type responses. So they were very pleased with that response. They also, as part of the project, asked that we create a steering committee of local leaders in town. We did that, and of that group, we included Paul Fry, the Chamber, Fred Chavez, the President of the Washington County NAACP, Councilmember Martinez, Sarah Nadeau from the Washington County Library, Tom Reiford from the Department of Commerce, and Betsy DeVore from the CVB. It also includes Wes, myself, and the mayor on that. We met in 2 sessions on the 13th and 14th of April. Guide held workshops on day 1 with this group and with the staff members to discuss the overall vision, the goals, needs, and expectations as it relates to the city brand. That was about a 3-hour discussion we had, and I thought it went very well. We got a lot of good ideas, a lot of good comments, a lot of good perceptions, both good and bad, on the city that Guide is going to be able to use moving forward. That afternoon, the mayor and I took the reps from Guide on a city tour, about 2.5 hours or so, drove around town, let them see the amenities and the features we have here all throughout town, the good and the bad, because we want to make sure they get a full picture of the city, not only our strengths, but also our weaknesses as we move forward. And then the mayor, I think, also went to dinner that night with them and had some more discussion. The next day, we included several more stakeholders in the group to have these same types of discussions with, expanded the group a little bit, including Mary Ann Berg from the Arts Council and some others to just get some more additional information. Guide has also reached out to several other community members through Zoom that weren't able to participate to get their input on what they feel is the various perception and their thoughts on the city to generate this whole brand and identity strategy moving forward. The next steps will be continued interviews with other community stakeholders. Guide is in the midst of accumulating this data, and they will be back. We will have a Zoom call next week with the steering committee to go over what they have found and to discuss their initial thoughts on the strategy as far as what our brand will look like and what our identity will be moving forward. Then they will be back on site probably the 1st or 3rd week of June, because most of us will not be here the 2nd week of June. The 1st or 3rd week of June to present their implementation strategy and design work for your input as a body at that time. So I am hopeful that by the end of summer, we will be in the area of being able to do a full kickoff on this new brand, be able to begin migrating and implementing that brand and identity into our everyday operation, letterhead, displays, that kind of thing, as well as the kickoff of a good marketing strategy to get people aware of what we have in downtown Hagerstown, whether that be through print media, social media, or the visual media. So Guide has been great to work with. They are super communicative. They were very knowledgeable on what we have here in the city before they got here. Our tour validated a lot of their impressions on our park system, on our downtown opportunities, on our economic development. So they were very engaged with us during that time, and I have a lot of hope that we're going to see a great product out of them. Mayor, do you have anything to add to that, being that you were part of it?
No, they definitely are very thorough. They came prepared, and there was a lot of great conversation that happened, so we're excited to see the next steps and then the final product. It'd be great.
Has or will the Youth Advisory Council be involved in any of these discussions? Is that a plan?
That would probably be not for this coming Zoom, but for their next on-site visit, to where they can incorporate more of we've got Main Street,
And Evan
Main Street and
Smedley
A&E.
from BISFA.
Yeah, and we have a BISFA rep, but yeah, that could be their next on-site visit. There's gonna be at least 2 more on-site visits that they're gonna have.
Yeah, I think that'd be important
Yep.
to include them in the conversation
Yep.
at some point.
All right. Any
Thank you.
Any questions? Good. Okay. Next, we have fiscal year '23 budget review.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So since we've finished most of our conversations around the general fund and the other governmental funds, these next 2 weeks, we're going to spend time mostly in enterprise funds, and if we have time, touch upon slightly anything that's in the general fund capital that anybody wishes to discuss. So for the enterprise funds this evening, we're going to split them up. We're going to do electric, water, and wastewater, and we're actually going to start with the capital project side, the major capital project items in electric, water, and wastewater, so I'm going to let Brooke cover those first.
So I'm just going to quickly review 2 or 3 capital improvement projects from each utility that are higher dollar. So starting with electric.
And you can find these in
Oh, yeah.
section 7.
I'm going to start on page 109. Electric vehicles, total expenditures budgeted for FY '23 are $405,000. This includes 2 pickup trucks, a forklift, and a bucket truck that isn't expected to be delivered until FY '25, so that'll be back next year.
Imagine that.
Hey, Brooke, when you say electric vehicles,
Yeah.
we're not talking electric vehicles.
We're talking EV.
Light department.
The electric department,
Okay,
the
just wanna
light
make sure of that.
department.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. Although if we could get an electric vehicle of that nature in 2025, we're doing better than a regular one.
$4.59 a gallon? Absolutely.
And then the next highest is meter replacement on page 124. This replaces meters across the city to improve device accuracy and provide for an automated read and outage detection system. $300,000 is budgeted in FY '23, all fully funded by the electric fund.
And for most all the items in the electric fund in fiscal year '23, the majority of every single project is
So
funded.
just for the people who are watching, you're
Yes.
talking 300,000 over the next, for the next 5 years for a total 1.5 million.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That replace every?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, he's not here, but I think it was at least to start and get in that rotation so that it was ongoing. I don't know that it will be 100% all of them finished in a 5-year period. It may
Yeah, I
take
got it.
slightly
Okay.
longer than that.
Okay.
Excuse me, it's to help to ensure compliance with COMAR and
Right.
the metering program that we have to have in place. We've been having some minor issues with accuracy.
Okay.
So it'll keep us in compliance.
All right, then we'll switch over to water. Page 134 is Wilson Treatment Plant. FY '23 projects include replacing the roof and gutters on the operations building, engineering costs and chlorine scrubber recommended by the EPA risk management plan, and then various improvements and miscellaneous projects. $950,000 is budgeted in FY '23, fully funded by the water fund. Page 136, Edgemont Reservoir improvements. $650,000 is budgeted here, partially by the water fund and then partially by MDE funding. This, let's see, construction of improvements to include probable maximum precipitation, and then continue MDE required reservoir improvements and watershed land acquisitions.
The MDE funding, I mean, it's unknown at this time. There's been applications and stuff, but until the items are ranked and we would be awarded, we do not know if this money would be in the form of a loan, like a bond, or if it would be in the form of grant. The other thing that they have done is loan forgiveness. So sometimes they've done all 3 for a specific project, and we wouldn't know how they would prorate or allocate that either.
And then finally, for water, the MAC water tank on page 137. 2.4 million is budgeted here in FY '23, for a total of 4.6 million for the entire project over 2 years. FY '23 includes a study and design phase, and the construction and construction management. This is due to an aging system, and I think there've been 2 or so leaks.
Didn't we discuss using ARPA funds for this?
We had discussed using ARPA funding for this, but at least one council member, so let's back up. So ARPA funding, we agreed that we were gonna do 30% of our ARPA for our infrastructure, water, wastewater, and stormwater. But it was decided, I think, that the water tank was a lower priority for city ARPA funding because there were 2 wastewater projects that were more concentrated for city and city residents
Okay.
versus the location of the water tank. But I might be paraphrasing, so if I am and I didn't do your justification well enough, but yes. So that's why we were looking for other sources. So in grand total, in fiscal year '23, Water Fund is looking at $6 million in projects. 2.5 would be through MDE funding of some sort, and the rest through the Water Fund, that would be 3.5.
And then moving on to wastewater on page 146. Wastewater vehicle replacements include a jet vac cleaner, a crane truck, and a van. And the camera rig that was covered by ARPA funding, we actually just received this, I think, last week. So that's gonna be pushed backwards into FY '22. But the total here is a little under 1.4 million, partially covered by ARPA, partially covered by wastewater fund.
Yes, it was an unexpected surprise that we were able to get the camera truck as quickly as we did. So it is here, an invoice check is going to be processed, and I think in another week or 2.
And it came in about 10,000 less, right?
Right, there was some portion of something, some software that wasn't necessary, so it was about 415,000 versus the 426 that's previously been approved in the consent form.
And then page 150, East End Pump Station number 33. $3 million is budgeted here in FY '23 using ARPA funding. This is construction of a lift station on Heb Road and some other miscellaneous projects. And then finally, Pump Station 13, page 151. 2.235 million is budgeted here using ARPA funding again. This is for the reconstruction and returning to service of Pump Station 13 off of Western Maryland Parkway.
So that was part of the combined joint services, updated joint services agreement with the county. Once the county builds their infrastructure in Morgansville and they take back that portion, then we are also, hopefully, at the same time, going to be constructing our pump station so that we can take back over at Western Maryland Parkway. So in total, wastewater fund, a little over $9 million in projects, 5.6 utilizing ARPA funding, another $3 million just coming straight from the wastewater fund, and with a small dollar amount coming from MDE grant and/or contribution from a developer. Now, we are actually going to turn to the actual financial statements of each of those. I think it was just easier, we decided instead of flipping back and forth between the sections for each of the funds, that we would try it differently. So while we didn't cover all of the electric at one time, hopefully it's not as confusing as what we just did. It just keeps everything all in the same place, in the same order. All right, so big picture for the electric fund. So if you turn to section 6, page 16, we apologize for the size of the font. When we get to the point where we're looking at financial projections and we include 2 years of actual information plus current year budget information and a proposed fiscal year '23, there's also an additional 4 years, so fiscal year '24 through fiscal year '27, in our estimates and our projections. So when you get all that detail and they're forcing you to put it to a single sheet, it gets quite small in print. So again, that is section 6, page 16. And for the electric fund, just a couple quick reminders. I think some of these we kind of touched upon, or Brooke touched upon in the very first meeting. And the electric fund, the wholesale power contract really is what is in place and is the leading impact on what not only we get charged, but also then what we charge our customers. And that new contract is in place through May 31 of 2022 with an extension through May 31 of 2024. If you look on page 16, you will notice in the middle is fiscal year 23 proposed budget. And at the very, very top, you'll see revenue. And you come down a little bit to see operating expenses with a line that says purchase power. Just a note that these are not in actual dollars. What you see here is rounded to thousands. So where you see purchase power expense for fiscal year 23, that is 19,102,000. That's not 19,000. Purchase power expense that we pay actually consists of 75%. So pretty much if you look at the revenue, 75% of all of our expenses is going to cover the purchase power agreement. So there's very little in the electric fund and the expense side that is not tied to this agreement. There is no change in full-time staffing positions, so there's no changes there. And capital projects, Brooke covered those, but 2.1. So if you come down the page and you see a little bit further than halfway down where you see increases, decreases in retained earnings, in fiscal year 23, you see a negative 186,000. So we are currently anticipating a deficit in the electric fund of $186,000. Come a little bit further down the page, you'll see where it says capital outlay, $2,055,000 or 2.1. Again, that's the capital projects that we talked about, and Brooke mentioned the two highest dollar ones. Right underneath that, net surplus / deficit, negative $1,515,000. So in fiscal year 23, with no increases in rates, with the current contract prices that we are going to pay, and with really very little other changes from fiscal year 22 current to fiscal year 23 expenses, we're looking at a decrease in overall cash of $1,515,000. Again, something that we don't normally spend a lot of time on, but for the first time when we're looking at doing the out-year projections within the electric fund without any additional rate increases, which we haven't done in many, many, many years. If nothing else changes, we are looking at continued projected deficits ranging from 99,000 the whole way to 784,000 in fiscal year 27. And if that occurs, we literally will have a negative total cash balance in the electric fund by fiscal year 26. Can we move to the water fund? Or any comments, questions? And I guess I should mention, beginning cash balance or ending cash balance for fiscal year 21 for the electric fund unrestricted was $5.9 million. We're projecting by fiscal year 23, so by June 30 of 2023, we're projecting that will be at $4.17 million.
So for full disclosure, when you have a negative cash balance, what does that mean? And how does that get fixed? Or one way it could be fixed?
So hopefully in our projections, it's a surefire indication, especially for the enterprise fund section, because what cannot happen for electric, water, and wastewater is the general fund cannot provide subsidies and prop it up.
Can you say that again?
So the general fund cannot provide subsidies to electric, water, and wastewater as an enterprise fund to prop them up. Technically, we could provide a loan from the general fund. However, when you do a loan from any fund to an enterprise fund, the bond rating agencies look unfavorably upon that, and your bond rating is at risk. So one option would be we subsidize it through taxpayer dollars from the general fund, which I would say absolutely not even as a loan. So we need to be very cognizant that this is a trend, and if projects were to occur and we cannot raise rates, and in the electric fund, we can expand our customer base, because not in the normal way. Just, we think annexation and growth, oh, that's great, we're gonna have all these new customers, but no, the electric fund boundary for customers was set, I think, back in the 1950s. So even as the city has grown, we can't grow and expand where we provide that service. So we would need to be looking into doing something with the rates. Again, learn from general fund, doing something with the PSC to change rates, find another way to do something with expenses. As I mentioned, primarily the largest expenses are purchase power contract, which is excellent prices and some of the lowest that we've had. So I'm not sure how we could get much better. The other thing is we talk about the option of privatizing it, right? If none of these other options, again, just brainstorming, thinking out loud if you're asking me what's all the different options. But definitely something for us to be cognizant and aware of and to be watching and mindful of.
The last rate increase was in the 2005, 2006 time period, so it's been a very, very long time since we've even considered, that's the last time we've done a rate increase.
And the rates for the electric for the city of Hagerstown residents is extremely low in comparison to private, even in comparison to other municipalities around.
Thank you.
But we are under the PSC regulations there. We can't just raise rates. This body we can't just do a cost study and come back and have this group raise rates like we can for water and wastewater. We're regulated under the PSC. Public Services Commission, PSC. All right, if we flip to page 19 in section 6, next we'll talk just briefly about the water fund. So with the water and wastewater funds both, we are able to do a cost rate model. So Nancy and her utility staff works with a contractor. They put in all these projections, much like you see here. This is why one of the reasons we try to ensure that we work hand in hand in these projections so that what we provide and display in the budget is matching what Nancy and the utility group is working with the contractor on, because the importance of that is they look at all the expenses and they come up with what the new charges should be so that this fund stays self-supporting. So the cost rate model was last approved and effective for fiscal year 20. So that's good through fiscal year 24. In the water fund, that meant fiscal year 23 budget, there's 3% annual increase there. There's no change in full-time staffing positions, but there is some reallocation in staffing between water and wastewater for lab positions. Total capital projects, as Brooke covered the top 3, is $6 million. And so if we look in the middle column again, so this is fiscal year 23, we see the operating revenue at the top, 13.5 million. And then you see there the operating expenses, it's different locations. And in this group, so all of electric, water, and wastewater has unionized employees. So this was actually one of the contracts that was just 1540 ASME was just approved. So some of the dollars will go up slightly, but not much. If we come down and look at increase and decrease in retained earnings halfway through the page, again, that's one of the most important numbers when we're reviewing and looking at projections for these utility funds. It's a deficit of $611,000. So we're anticipating with all the new charges coming in and benefit fees that we can charge, minus all the expenses and the spends that we're doing, that we're going to have a deficit of $611,000. If you come a little bit further down, we're going to adjust back. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to look at all that stuff. Anything that is not a cash impact, we're going to subtract out or add back, and anything that needs to be subtracted, we will, to get to the net surplus or deficit. And if you look, the net deficit for fiscal year 23 for the water fund will be at $3.5 million. And that's because we're looking at doing a lot of projects, but most of them are being funded with prior fund balance from the water funds, and specifically their cash balance. So if you look slightly below the decrease in cash of 3.5 million, you'll see that fiscal year 21, we ended with total cash of 16.2 2 million, and we're estimating by the time we get to June 30, 2023, we'll end with 11.8 million. Again, trends that we have in projections that we have included for the next 4 years there, we're looking at really utilizing a lot of the water fund cash. And if we were to fund everything in the manner in which we say and complete all those projects, by fiscal year 27, the water fund would also be at a negative cash. So unlike the electric fund and the water fund, we have the ability to adjust between now and then. Again, the service fees and what's being charged to customers. Our current one would expire fiscal year 24. So as Nancy is working through all those, I'm imagining as long as we hear what the funding is really going to be on these projects, that is going to definitely impact the user fee schedule.
So, I mean, I have concerns with bullet point 5, and maybe I'm just not understanding what I'm reading correctly, but it kind of sounds like you're talking about these benefit charges that are going to increase slightly, which is a reflection of minor adjustments in rate schedule, right? And I go down to 2 more bullet points and read the basic. We're going to sort of use cash on hand. We got a bunch of big projects coming up, so we build up this cash on hand, but even with those adjustments, we're going to be looking at increasing negative numbers, 2 bullet points down. And while we're looking at increasing negative ending balance cash flows, we're also going to be depleting our cash resources to the degree that you know, we wouldn't do on the general fund side.
Correct.
I mean, that's what I'm reading here. And then I flip over to section 7 that we just got done, and I read about projects, and I'm gonna say the same thing on the wastewater side, that really benefit largely a bunch of development that's happening outside of the city. And I just have to scratch my head and say, we're gonna deplete our cash resources, we're gonna go into the negative on our ending balances because entities out at the airport need us to meet new standards by building, you know, big new things, infrastructure-wise. And the same goes, you know, and I know Edgemont, you know, it definitely is critical to the city, but it serves a lot of customer base and primary to customer base development from that area in Smithsburg all the way in Jefferson before it even gets to this city. In fact, I believe we have more water customers outside of the city than we have inside of the city at this point,
Just about.
right?
We do, it's a 45-55 split.
Right, and I just, it's difficult as a city citizen, as a city taxpayer and ratepayer to read these numbers and go, this is the direction we're going to go to benefit development outside of the city. And understanding that those ratepayers outside of the city, you know, aren't on the fiscal hook for this because they're not properties within the corporate boundaries of the city. And that to me is not a
No, Chris, I was having Nancy grab the mic.
that to me is not, you know, quantifiably, you know, appropriate.
And so some of the things I would say that are different with the water fund than the electric fund is this. One, this group in this body actually will decide on what those rate fees should be. So we have projected 3% increase, only because it's what was already approved for the last 5 years, right? So assuming no other changes in that, this is what's going to happen. It also assumes that we are going to do all of these big projects. So we are going to have conversations soon, right, Nancy, on at least 2 of the big projects. You know, are we going to concentrate our efforts first and foremost on doing infrastructure and replacing our transmission mains, or are we going to concentrate on Edgemont Reservoir? And I'm not saying that we can't do both, but realistically, unless our rate structure is going to alter drastically with the current trends that we have going on, we can't do all of them all at one time. within a 3-year period.
I get that the transmission versus Edgemont Reservoir dialogue continues to occur, but, and I haven't looked at the capital section in depth, but when I see a project that says in Zone 3, you know, we need to boost this area because of requirements to meet specifications out at the airport area, and at the same time, I see that we got to replace the MAC tank, and then I think to myself, you know, we have a finite capability from the Potomac, from our West End Reservoir. We're talking about 2 projects to meet that obligation in an area north of the city. I mean, it just continually says to me that Edgemont, you know, is critical to meeting the adequate sort of pressurization and flow of the system. I get we put lines in and we boost that production in some, you know, measurable amount, but it doesn't retain that critical additional resource should, as you read in the capital section that says, you know, MAC tank has a leak and you know, just about becomes, you know, unusable, you know, you start to think, okay, I need to make sure that those usable sources coming from those different directions are you know, able and ready to go in that capacity.
Yeah, this part of what you're talking about also ties in with what we're working on right now as far as the code amendments, looking at capacity management. I'm sorry, my allergies are killing me. And so in doing that, one of the things that we ultimately wanted to look at was benefit fees outside for water, because outside customers pay the exact same amount for the capacity in our water system as inside customers do. There's no differential there. On our usage fees, outside customers pay twice what inside customers do for residential customers. That's also true for non-residential, but they're in the declining tier as opposed to the inclining tier. So one of the things that we also have to look at is a new 5-year rate plan. So as we look at the new 5-year rate plan and we look at capacity management and we look at the what we need to do with benefit fees, we should be able to pull all of this together in doing that. And also in doing that, looking at especially the benefit fees, if we implement a differential, then that will actually help to build our restricted cash to pay for the capital projects.
So 2 things, in my mind, 2 things have to happen. There has to be a differential in both if we're going to continue, because I get a little bit frustrated when I then go to have those sit-downs with our county counterparts, and they say, well, what are you doing to benefit the county? And I sit here and say, well, I've got $25 million worth of infrastructure, water and sewer infrastructure projects, right? That I'm going to charge folks outside of the city the same for, that are receiving the largest benefit from, because most of this stuff in the city is already developed. You know what I mean? It's already served by a system that has existed. We're making these adjustments, and I don't care whether you talk wastewater side with the pump station 13 costs, or whether you're talking the improvements out at the airport. Both of those things, like many of these others, and when I look at spending $5.6 million in ARPA, it would be even more upside down if we didn't have, that figure to turn to. And the second thing that I think has to happen is, I've heard for years, this declining rate structure, and I get it. There's a time of day when there was just an abundance of water that we had as a business to sell, right? But I think of ourselves much like Potomac Edison does now, and you've seen over the last 10 years, what has Potomac Edison done? It has realized that it is cheaper to contribute its resources to sustainable infrastructure than it is to fight the fight and cost to build entirely new segments of system, right? So EV stations versus a new 250K line, and I'm not an electric guy, but I'm just using that as an example, it's actually less expensive. So when I look at our rate structure and say, we have this finite amount, and we're going to continue to have the necessity of increasing infrastructure capacity outside of our service area or our traditional service area, you're going to have to adjust that rate scale so that it is escalating, just like most other water and sewer entities do at this point, because the alternative is the areas where it's already, bought and paid for, is getting that same 3% increase because you got a declining scale that provides it at a subsidized rate, frankly, than what it otherwise should be.
And we'll certainly look at, all of the different variables and bring those to the mayor and council as we work through the new 5-year rate model. I would say on the wastewater side, there is a differential for the benefit fees. So outside customers do pay more, but the dynamics in the wastewater system are similar to that in light, in that the wastewater system we have much fewer outside customers, so the wastewater system is mostly supported by inside customers. And then, of course, that dynamic will change a little more with the Mogginsville area and, some correction associated with Pump Station 3 and associated with the Joint Service Area Agreement. But, I guess there's a couple of things going on, that we have to bring together. And one is capacity management along with rates. The other thing too, Scott, I think we should mention is the conversations with the county and trying to make the county understand that, if we're going to serve, if there's any hope that we're going to serve these areas, it doesn't matter whether it's water or wastewater, they have to be a partner in funding. We've talked about submitting joint funding applications to MDE and other agencies that may have funding available, where the county will be, assuming some of that responsibility. We haven't worked out all of the dynamics on how we do that yet, but we did start that conversation, about a month or so ago, about how is this going to be paid for. The city can't pick up the tab to grow, especially the water system in all of the areas that the county wants water served.
So new development outside of the city cannot get the benefit of both. Meaning it can't get the benefit of saying, you know what, I'm not in the corporate boundaries, therefore I'm not responsible for the debt obligation that the city then assumes to take on that debt for infrastructure that benefits me directly, and get the benefit of the declining scale and same rate charge outside, because then they get the reduced rate, right? They get the reduced expense, and they have no obligation associated with the debt capacity that the corporate tax boundary does. That to me doesn't make a lot of sense and if it would be one thing if I was sitting here and 75% of these capital projects in Section 7 were related to in-city oriented project development, but it's just not. It's not at all. And I think the only thing, again, saving the wastewater side from the water side at this point is the ARPA funds we're directing, and the fact that there isn't as much outside, that it isn't as large of a system.
Right, that's very true.
And all those reasons, it just brings all the conversations that everybody's been sitting at this table over the last 12 months together in discussing the difficult conversations. So as we're talking about wastewater, I'm just going to real quick finish up. So we're going to look at wastewater. We're going to turn to page 22. And again, the middle of the column is fiscal year 23 budget. The wastewater rate model, again, is effective through fiscal year 24, and wastewater also had 2% increase, a 2% annual increase. So it was slightly different than on the water side. If we look, there was no change in any full-time staffing here. Again, there was a slight shift in allocation of water and wastewater lab staffing. You're not going to see it, it's not dramatic, like if you look from fiscal year '23 to '22. The total capital projects here in the wastewater fund, as we previously mentioned, were about 9.1 million, but a lot of that, again, is funded by other funding that we have received and isn't totally reliant upon wastewater cash that's been built up. So if you come and look, fiscal year '23, halfway through the page, unlike electric and water, there is going to be a surplus, an estimated surplus of 6.5 million. Then if we look and take out the things that do not impact cash and do impact cash, if you come to the bottom, a net deficit or a cash reduction of $847,000. So again, on the wastewater side, we've built up, we've been slowly rebuilding the cash there, which had been declined in for many, many years previously. And we have been doing more on bond funded and less on utilizing our cash reserves now for projects. But again, the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, federal dollars is helping to do the projects here. So again, on the wastewater side, things are a little bit better, a little bit healthier. If, again, nothing changes and we look at continuing a 2% increase in the out years for wastewater, but we'll definitely look whenever the rate model discussion restarts.
Yeah, I just think bullet points 5 and 7 in both of those, both water and sewer,
Yes.
should give everybody some urgency to say, we need to look at the rate structure sooner than later. Meaning this year, and we should make the necessary adjustments, because I think, as you said in the beginning, this is an enterprise fund, it's a business fund. It's supposed to, not only be self-supporting, but it's supposed to allocate costs associated with the cost of doing business to those customer bases, in a proportionate amount that they should be paying for that cost.
Right. And so the bullet points that our Councilmember Alshire is referencing is, so in that same section, so for wastewater, as I pointed you to page 22, that's where you actually see the financial information in dollars, but the page prior to it, wastewater, there's a number of bullets, and it's just giving you a brief description of what our assumptions were in building that and looking in the out years. And we try, and again, he mentioned bullets 5 and 7. We try to keep it consistent. So first bullet, we're talking about service charges and rate models, and then operating expenses. Third bullet, depreciation expense, and so on and so forth. So again, so that there's consistency and a flow. So that's where he's looking. He's actually looking at the narrative in a very short amount of words that we have available, and then also referencing back to our capital improvement section, because it's, as Brooke was going through the capital projects, there's a lot more detailed information there.
And the alternative is, if you don't address that sooner than later, you'll hit a point where you go, okay, now we gotta raise it 12%.
Right.
I mean, that's what's gonna happen, and then you gotta explain that,
Correct.
to the folks that put you in the seat, I guess.
So that's where we were going to stop this evening for fiscal year '23 budget, and we're going to come back next week and talk about the golf fund, stormwater fund, property management fund, and potentially some general, and parking fund. I'm so sorry. How can I forget the parking fund?
Thank you.
Now
Thank
we
you,
have
Nancy.
the ARPA allocation update.
Yes, so I think a lot of our budget conversations, just was a great segue into our update. And I realized that we had not actually been back and had a formal meeting since we all last met in December. And since we met in December, we were actually in this room for one of the last longer meetings, and we actually had things on the screen, and we had really long, detailed spreadsheets. And so the purpose of this evening is a couple things. We wanted to get back before this body and make sure that we are discussing all those projects. I think when we left that meeting, it was with the understanding or the request that we now that items were picking as priority by the administration on where we were going to spend the funding, that we try to go back and put dollar amounts and figures to those categories. So that's what we've attempted to do. The other thing is, instead of utilizing those long spreadsheets, we are really looking to incorporate the summary sheets that we're going to cover tonight. Hopefully, there's sufficient information there for this group and body, but if not, we'll bring back when we do the reviews, the longer detailed ones. But we are hoping to utilize these summary spreadsheets to put on our website so that they're out there for the public to constantly be able to see, here's where we are. And again, as part of this allocation plan for our $20.4 million, it is simply that. It is our plan. This is where we're thinking we're going to spend our money, and we're going to update it every single time we come back, because anytime there's any project or funding is going to include ARPA dollars, whether that project typically would not come and be separately approved, we are going to do that just because we want to be very open and transparent. And by doing this, again, hopefully the charts, if we can utilize the same ones, the charts that we utilize here that are public record would be the same ones that are on our website. It would make it easier for people and more consistent, right, message that people are seeing. So a couple of things. On the first chart, so total $20.4 million. Again, we received the $10.2 million, 20.4, 10.2 last May. Just earlier this week or last week, we received the notification from the IRS that the Treasury portal was open. I went out and updated and submitted our information to get our second payment or tranche of another 10.2. We're hopefully expecting that soon. We haven't seen anything back that they had any additional questions on the updated information that we submitted. So on the first chart, if you look across, you will see the categories of public health, negative economic impact public sector, infrastructure, revenue replacement, and then the last column is two categories, premium pay and administrative. And these are the 7 categories that we've been talking about. When the IRS finally released the final rule, they renamed some of these. One of the other things that they have done since we last met officially to discuss ARPA funding and decide where funds were going to go, they made a change in revenue replacement. So instead of us having to do a calculation every December and sending it to them to see what that looks like, how much we could utilize in that specific category, we were able to make a one-time standard election, meaning they have now decided through the federal ruling that we can use up to $10 million of what we receive in our revenue replacement, which would have to be paid for something that's governmental services wise. So on this first sheet, we're going to cover the categories, the allocated amounts, and for the most part, these are items that have already been to council and approved as a consent form, and or when we get to the infrastructure column, when we met in December, 30% was the magic number. So we decided, this group decided 30% of our total allotment from ARPA could be utilized for infrastructure. And as a reminder, the only infrastructure that counts in this category is water, wastewater, stormwater. Broadband also counts, but we, at the time, decided not to do anything there. So public health, first we have the Hagerstown Ice Rink, and we just approved or had on the current agenda to do the upgrades, the air intake and dehumidification system there. So that's under public health. 32 North Potomac purchase, we actually acquired the building for $825,000. We have a little bit left to help with the actual renovation and the kiosk and some of the other things for that building. And then we have isolation quarantine program, and that was through Goodwill Horizon, and we're going to provide to them up to $10,000. So total allocated in public health that's already been approved is $1.26 million. We no longer had anything in the negative impact column that's already been allocated, so we'll move to the next one. Under negative impact, economic and public sector, the two-factor authentication software, again, this was something that came through, it was an IT software update. It's all about security, and that actually falls not under revenue replacement, but under this category. So $26,000 we've committed there, allocated, and actually we've already processed that purchase order. Then in the middle column, infrastructure, 30%. So that's 6.12 million. And those projects, again, 2 for wastewater. One is pump station 13 and one is pump station 33. The final project there is a stormwater project. The cost of the stormwater project is $700,000, or anticipated to be $700,000 for over at our Hagerstown Fieldhouse. Again, the Fieldhouse itself is not eligible for ARPA funding, but the stormwater project that we're doing for it is. Next, in the category of revenue replacement, is a fire department ladder truck, which has previously been approved, and we've paid a 50% deposit. A backhoe purchase that is on order, but we don't know when we will get. A wastewater fund camera truck, as we mentioned, $415,000, which is already here. A roof replacement at 60 West Washington Street. And finally, police department body-worn camera upgrades. As everybody came in, if they remember, the tasers, body-worn cameras, and virtual training upgrade we're able to cover with revenue replacement. And then last but not least, the combined categories of premium pay and administrative. So premium pay, we did stipends, 2.15 million. And grant coordinator that had been approved, the 288,000, and that reflects 3 full years for the grant coordinator, and also some miscellaneous things like software, computer, or a desk chair. So with all of that, we have allocated 12.2 million. That leaves 8.18 or 8.2 million still unallocated. The next sheet, the next chart, we went back and looked in December at all the priority items. So anything that had at least 3 votes as a priority project or an item, we've incorporated. And the only other thing on here that is in addition is underneath the revenue replacement category. And those were things that were included in the fiscal year 23 budget that we included ARPA funding so that we could purchase those items and still have a balanced budget. And we did include that ARPA funding chart that we covered in the very first week as a summary, and then the second week when we covered general fund. So under the category of public health, there was many different behavioral and mental health categories, including a 24-hour crisis center, accreditation costs for service providers, expanding availability of counselors, bridge funding gap for treatment, youth violence prevention program. So we're allocating a total of $525,000 there. Again, as we move forward and work with these partners and have more specific details on exactly who and where that funding will be concentrated, we will change this block so that we break that out more detailed. So if we do $25,000, for instance, for a youth violence prevention program, we would create a separate block for that and show that separately. But again, public health, $525,000. In the next column negative economic impacts, we had some priority project for increasing educational and training opportunities for city residents, expanding transit for employment, HCC, USMH, and other educational scholarships, affordable daycare program for students and new job seekers, downtown training space, home office space grants, and local artists and bands. So again, a multitude of things. So there, overall, about $425,000. The next block down, the creation of home office space, that was looking at trying, my understanding was for the city to develop some type of incentive program that would help to fund or renovate space for home offices. It's about, we're allocating 50 because we're not sure how much or what that looks like. The next one's to support local artists and bands, $25,000. The next category, blight eradication and affordable housing, $500,000. And that $500,000 is just, again, is a match to what we are already getting through CPF funding of $500,000. And then, I'm sorry, we had that one here twice. Yeah. And then, so that means about $1 million in that category. And then the third column is negative economic impact for the public sector. One of the items, priority items, was an outreach coordinator. that would be the liaison between the city and social services agencies, so that we would have one core person or dedication, so we're putting 90,000 there. The next column, infrastructure, again, 30% was the maximum, so we already had that in allocated. The next to last column is revenue replacement. So seeing as how we have a $10 million maximum, we can't have what has already been obligated and approved plus new requests being higher than 10 million. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first 6 items I'm going to mention are items that were in the budget. Office 365 implementation for $120,000. And this would enable, so for instance, Brooke and I are in the same office. We have 2 different computers. She has one version of Outlook and Excel and Word, and I have another. So anytime we're working on a document, and so we have like 8 staff. So anytime we're working on a document like the budget book, we all have different versions, and at some point, the versions do not work very well together. So Office 365 would put it more to a cloud version. It would all be within IT, and then it would push down to all the computers. So everybody would have the same version of Outlook, no matter where you were. Makes remote work easier, enables a lot of other things. Along with the Office 365 implementation is a phone system upgrade. And again, those two kind of went hand in hand. A police fire range target system, and it's included in the CIP for $40,000. A fuel station management and tank gauge system, we passed the point of updates, we needed that, $20,000. Professional court extension, we have some federal ARC monies. We are looking to put in ARPA funding of 1.15, and the rest is other city local dollars that we already have there for our match. One of the last items that we had in the budget is for the fire department for a gas generator for one of the stations where it needs replaced, and that estimated to cost about $50,000. That leaves us with about 5.1 million out of the total 20.4. So for right now, to have an allocation plan, we have put that as a placeholder for future governmental services needs. And again, these can be changed at any point in time. So that would be the way that I recommend and staff recommend we allocate the last 8.1, so that we have a plan and a chart forward. And then a lot of work would need to be done on these other items.
Are you guys okay with that, or have any questions?
I have a question. I'm okay with that, I just have a question.
Okay.
So, in the category of negative economic impact, I believe that the federal regulation said that was for a specified period of time, right? And then you could direct it to businesses or entities that experience an economic loss during that specific period of time, right?
If we're given it, yes. And
So-
then some of the other things, I don't know that there was a specific period in time. Like, so if you were, for instance, like the outreach coordinator position.
Right.
Because it's covering a need, and it might not necessarily have been applicable from March 20 to
So-
March 2022.
But-
We could still, as long as it was through December 31, 2024 with it.
But do they specify that it must be provided to a third party?
No. No. So they've come back and they changed. So there was negative economic impact, and I forget what else they called it before, but when they made when the final ruling was finally pushed out, they changed the third column, negative economic impact public sector, to free up some other things. So like, for instance, if I go back and I look, and I talked about Office 365, quite honestly, it's a way for us to get all of our computer systems on the same platform so that we don't have problems working cohesively, whether we are sitting right next to each other or we're working remotely. Quite frankly, that 120,000 could be placed, in my opinion, if we finish the research, under the negative economic impact public sector, because it's one of the ways that we're going to respond to the pandemic, and especially on the information technology side, how we are going to, going forward, ensure that we are able to continue to work seamlessly. A lot of the IT stuff, for instance, can be moved over, and we have to look, because they freed up some stuff for public sector also, for public safety. So like the body worn cameras, when we originally approved them, we said revenue replacement.
You have a specific question, don't you?
I'm sorry.
That's okay, that's okay. Well,
sorry.
we have specific funds within the city's overall operations that we just talked about, and that we're going to talk about, like the parking fund, the golf course, the swimming pool, the stadium, our electric utility. Would they be deemed eligible for negative economic impact for recuperation of cost or redirection of funds for that loss during that period of time?
No.
So if your golf course typically operated at $300,000 a year, but because of COVID went down to $100,000, you couldn't say your golf course experienced a negative economic impact, and therefore you can't replace that for that enterprise
Right.
fund.
So that would more than likely end up under revenue replacement, but we can't use revenue replacement to actually replace dollars that we did not get. We have to actually utilize it. So instead of
But does that mean we in the general fund sense, or does that mean we
as a
total?
city. So we
Okay.
as an organization for revenue replacement can't just use that money to say, hey, hotel motel revenue that we received, was.
Well, that's a separate thing. I mean,
50%.
that's an amount we get.
Right, so
I'm talking
even
about
on the
like a
golf course,
business
the
that
golf
we
course
run.
was closed, well, we actually had more money, but we're gonna go with,
We
we're gonna
did,
go with
and
that.
I did
We're
look
gonna
at
go
the
with that.
numbers.
However, what it looks at is it says, no, you can't necessarily use it to recoup that dollar, but what you can do is now utilize it for something that is general governmental services and is eligible underneath here, and use that funding, use ARPA funding, so that you can free up other money, or be able to do it because you weren't able to do it in a prior year because of the loss in revenue. So like, it would depend on
Okay.
the specific item in which we're spending to see if it could in any way come under negative economic impact under the public sector.
Okay,
It's more restrictive.
right.
Any other questions?
But for other organizations like nonprofits,
Right.
yes, and we would have to look, and because at some point, even if you were doing if we were doing a new grant program now that says, hey, we'll help you cover,
Right, we couldn't
Critics.
replenish the economic loss in our pool, but we could do it for somebody else's pool.
as long as it wasn't already covered with somebody else's federal dollars that
Right,
they've
right.
already received.
DPP or anything else.
Right.
Okay.
Which is part of the whole problem.
Right. And then if we do it through nonprofits, we would actually get to develop that program. So would we say, we would look at things just like, hey, just give me this revenue category, and if you're short and you didn't have anything else that you used to replenish that specific line item, or we would say, here, let's look at the net.
Okay.
Right? Does that help? Did I answer it?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Too much information?
You did fantastic.
Are we good with this as an overall plan? Because if so, I think we'll clean up where we had that double, not sure how that happened on that last version, but we will clean that up. We'll work with everybody to get it out on our website, because we're really looking at permission to actually, this is the plan.
Under public health and the 525,
Yes.
I mean,
Do you need it to be higher? Do you need it to be
no, I
lower?
just was wondering if there's an update on where that is as a total project.
Yeah, I met yesterday. There's community partners meeting constantly about the need for crisis, so we need to meet with DES, because in order for CRS or any other service to be able to transport somewhere other than the hospital, it has to be approved by MIMS or it has to be approved by DES. So that's step one, to make sure that they're on board with it. I would certainly hope they're on board with it, because they're gonna have all their first responders saying that it needs to happen, and then we'll move from there.
Okay. Thank you. We'll be back in like 3 months to do an update on ARPA.
Thank you so much.
Hang on for the CVB too, since you're there.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, yep, that's next, the request for ARPA funding.
So, Dan Spedden was here a couple weeks ago, gave you a presentation. That category, as you've just seen, was not included in the original priority listing of your desires as far as ARPA funding went at that time. However, as Michelle said, there is still a unallocated balance available that you could decide to do, or you could decide to provide. From that amount to CVB, you could do more, you could do less. But since he was here, it was probably, it's time that had that discussion and we could provide feedback back to him.
And so only one thing I would note is that anytime we're giving federal dollars like this, right, this is a very specific example. So what I can say is this: we would enter sub-recipient agreement that we would have to have. There would be very specific documentation that we would have to have. But it does not matter if the money stays at the city of Hagerstown or we give that money to somewhere else. If it starts as a federal dollar, wherever it ends, it's a federal dollar, and it is under the same federal regulations. So we would need to ensure whenever we do any of this, if it's for specific services like this, like future services, that a formal RFP be done and that they include any federal regulation grant requirements within
It
that.
all falls under our procurement process?
No, so ours, yes, but more so because it's federal, it would follow under federal, so.
Okay.
If applicable.
Davis-Bacon, all of that
Yeah,
good stuff.
prevailing wages, and there's a whole lot of compliance language that's been added. They don't necessarily have everything finalized, but we'd strongly encourage everybody to utilize that, because no matter where that ends, because we are flows and through us, we have to be able to show that documentation back during our audit.
So it's pretty specific outline what they would like money for, and it is to promote tourism in the city of Hagerstown. And he did discuss with me more at length, but also up here about, partnering with the new community, I forget the official title, Brittany.
Engagement?
Yeah,
Community engagement officer.
community engagement officer to help promote the events that they're gonna be working on, we're gonna be working on as a city. So the request is for $250,000. Don't know if you guys have interest in that amount, another amount.
I have an interest in 75,000. And if you'd like to know how I came up with that,
I will.
sure. Bullet point 3 is clearly an item specific to the city, so I'd be happy to fully fund that item. And I applied a 25% rate.
What was that again? Which one?
Bullet
Under
point
the
3.
executive summary.
Under the executive summary, which is page 2 of this document.
Yep.
And then I applied a 25% to the other 3 figures, because we are 25% roughly of the county's total population. So I figure that 25% of it will be spent on things,
Did they present to the county?
I'm sorry?
They present to the county.
Yes, the county gave them a $500,000, I believe.
And it might be in that document somewhere.
I can't tell the numbers, it's so small on this one page, even my glasses don't help.
I'm pretty sure it was 500,000.
Yes, I believe it was. I'm almost positive it was 500,000. Yeah, and I don't see that it's in here, but I watched the meeting. I'm almost positive it was 500,000. Does anyone else have any thoughts, input?
And the 500 came out of the county's Arpa funds, right?
Yes.
As with these.
Was it from their ARPA or was it CARES? I don't remember.
It was ARPA, yeah.
Is this like, we talked about just a second ago, the replacement of lost income? That,
This is a new program,
this is a new, oh,
this
Yeah,
is
I mean,
new.
these
they're trying to ramp up
Yeah, this is new.
advertising, especially to areas outside of here, to draw people into Hagerstown
I mean, the
and
amount
also
of
help
money they
promote
must have
our fits.
received from the federal government through PPP and things like that.
Tremendous,
Tremendous, tremendous.
tremendous amount.
I missed the first part of your sentence.
The amount of money they got,
Okay.
That they'd received from federal.
Yeah,
PPP, et cetera,
from other federal monies, right.
original CARES.
But this is a new program, so this doesn't, it's not restricted in the spending of ARPA.
As long as it goes towards tourism, the tourism industry, it's not restricted.
So where would that fit?
And they're
in
agreeing
this?
to only use Hagerstown-based businesses as much as possible, like Manning Media, High Rock, Herald Mail, Tri-State Printing,
Although they
for production needs.
have to be very careful, you can't actually have local preference in your federal bids.
Right.
But that doesn't go out, I mean,
Well, that's
what
stupid.
is their reach? I don't think that reach is like outside of our general population here. I mean, how far does the Herald Mail Media go?
Well, but they
Well, there's no
look in there
other
further,
media
they're
team.
Well, I'm
looking,
just
they've
saying,
got,
but the intention is to get like outside people,
Right.
but yet use a local publication. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't,
they,
Well, they do outline on the one page, how to, a sample of media buys to amplify and boost messaging.
Following along Kristen's logic, I'd be willing to go 125, which is 25% of 500,000.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, 75 is my ceiling.
I'll bump that up a little bit.
Nope.
can we meet in the middle and do 100?
I mean,
125 is what I'd be willing to go, which is 25% of 500,000, which is what the county did.
I'm assuming there's gonna be no ask of the other 8 municipalities in this county that also received ARPA funding.
Guaranteed it's not.
So, there's, no, 75 to me is the fair figure, more than fair, when there won't be an ask of those other municipalities that will benefit from this activity. Because that means our citizens then are contributing, already contributing, right? Because they make up part of that 500,000, right? Because they're county residents. You know what I mean? So, we're giving more and some. Anyway, I'm at 75, and that was my logic, and that was,
I'm still,
I mean, I understand the logic on both. I'm fine with 125, but, I mean, Hagerstown is the biggest part of Washington County, and they do go by the logo, Visit Hagerstown. So when they advertise, it's gonna specifically say our name in it.
And it will be in conjunction with our branding and marketing efforts that we are also doing. It's not going to be
Yes.
some brand-new campaign that we're going to be competing with.
Correct, and Betsy is on the,
yeah, Betsy's on
Betsy is
the
set in on the meeting.
steering
Because
committee
that will be extremely
for
important.
this reason, for this and other, I mean,
Okay.
certainly, she's great at what she does.
I mean, I love the fact that it does say Visit Hagerstown. I mean, you're right, but I definitely want that same consistency.
Mhm.
I'm fine with 125.
Tiara,
125.
okay. 125. More updates to your previous document, Michelle.
Okay. I'll reduce the placeholder in the revenue replacement.
Right.
Thank you. All right, lastly, before our break, we have the Juneteenth sponsorship request.
Good evening. So just to give you a little bit of background, in our department, we created a process a couple of years ago for event sponsorship requests. And it also includes, after we award a sponsorship amount, that the event organizer gives us a post-event report. Kind of a new process, and I think it's building consistency among our awards of sponsorship across a range of events. So some quick statistics, we have a budget, a line item of $41,500. And in fiscal year 22, 18 events were supported with that line item, using this process. The range of event sponsorships, there were two above 5,000, the CVB Canal Conference, World Canal Conference, a special one-time only event at 5,000, and the Donut Drop at 10,000. And then majority of the events ranged 4,000 and below, and mostly 3,000 and below. So the request that we have is for Juneteenth, which last year received a sponsorship amount of $3,700. Their request last year was for an event that had post-event report of expenses of $10,400 and attendance of 830, 512 on Friday night and 318 on Saturday night. And the city provided a sponsorship amount of $3,700. The event is growing, and the request that came in is for $28,300. The expenses in the event are $73,274 projected expenses. So that's a growth of an event that last year was operating at just over 10,000, now projected to operate at 73,000. So we're here tonight to seek your direction on the sponsorship amount to be given for this year. Of the $41,500, we've used all of that. We've gone over budget by about 3,000, and that's with an assumption of the 3,700 again for Juneteenth. I'm happy to answer any questions or go into any more detail.
So 3,700 is what we budgeted for, and that's already included in this year's budget.
Right.
Big jump.
I mean, I think we all know we can't pay $28,500. We just don't have that, we don't have a discretionary fund like the county has.
The county used hotel motel tax.
County what?
The county, I believe, used hotel motel to pay for it. This would be general fund.
County gave him how much? 29?
29.
I'm just gonna throw this out there, and I know I'm probably gonna get my head cut off for it, but if we just allocated $125,000 of ARPA funding to go to tourism efforts, well, not you, but, okay, 3 of us just did that, to go toward tourism efforts from the CVB. And, you know, we have an event, that could be a tourism driver. And I'm just saying, there's money available.
Well, the only thing with that would
Just
be,
isn't coming out of the general fund.
the only thing about that would be providing this amount this year. We won't have ARPA availability next year.
No, we won't, no.
When that request
No, we
probably will come through again for that amount of
First year is a
money,
federal
obviously.
holiday, though.
Huh?
This is the first year is a federal holiday.
So are
Right.
you suggesting we use ARPA money? Or are you
Yeah.
suggesting that CVB uses the ARPA money we
I'm
just gave them?
suggesting we use ARPA money out of the
I said the same
unallocated
thing.
fund that we just
I said
pulled the
the same
Well-
CVB money out of.
I said the same thing.
Nah, it's tourism.
It's a tourism event.
But
No
what do we
different
do?
than- I mean, it's
I-
at least an event.
But my question is that where does it stop with the new requests that would come
I get
in?
that.
We do
I
need a
get that.
process.
When you run out of
a
ARPA
different
money.
process.
We got, okay,
Yeah.
still.
I mean, it's just a free, you get piggy bank. You just-
Yeah, and we are
Milk it
getting
till
a
it's
lot
gone.
more requests. We got a request for a basketball league, we got a request from the members parade, we got a request from, Earn, we got a request, I mean, we are getting, you know, more and more and more asking way above what we normally allocate.
Oh, I understand.
And again, the only thing I'm saying is that if you take this out of ARPA money this year, what happens next year? When there's no ARPA money, and we can't utilize, this has to then become a budgeted item out of the general fund.
And we'll have to have a lot of statistical demographic data.
Right.
Back up, once the event's done.
Could we offer up to a certain amount and then it just is reimbursable?
Forget it.
You know, say we can offer one time, since it's the first year as a federal holiday, it's gonna be a grander event, offer up to 10,000 or whatever that dollar amount is, and it's reimbursable as needed.
So if we use ARPA dollars, we will definitely have to do a sub-recipient agreement, and we have to go through a risk analysis of the organization, and there is a form that they have to complete and fill out, and then once the event's done, they would have to report statistical information back. So it's definitely more restrictive than city local funds.
So where am I plugging in CVB on this chart?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. We're not doing all that
I'm
for,
gonna go back and take a look where the tourism fund is, though. I need to go look.
Okay.
and we have 3,700 budgeted, right?
Right, just carrying forward prior to the request, carrying forward what we had given them last year as a placeholder, the 3,700.
Security is costing 5,000 in and of itself, using HPD. That's the estimate, correct?
Correct. And I had a very quick phone call with Lieutenant Renner. I'm aware that there's a logistics committee meeting this Thursday to talk through some of the logistics items with the event organizers. I believe HPD is open to either HPD officers or private security companies. Private security companies may be more affordable, so that might adjust a budget line item. And it may be the preference, I don't want to speak for the police department, but it may be a preference of the police department as a way of managing the workforce demand on events. The donut drop, Lieutenant Renner mentioned that the donut drop was an example this year that had used elements of private security as a part of supporting an event.
And can you explain why officers are required for this event?
I think, you know, any time you have a special event, we have a review of the event with our logistics committee, which includes Public Works, Fire Department, and Police. And it's the police recommendation for elements of security when alcohol is present, as well as crowd control elements.
But again, where private security could do the same thing,
Could.
just without powers of arrest. I mean, you know, and when we have events downtown, we typically don't don't budget for police officers, we just use what police officers we have who are on duty would cover that area if needed. Unless there's some special request from like the Mount Theater or something like that, would be the event item.
Right.
And that's mainly for crowd control.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes there is police cost charged to an event organizer if HPD recommends it.
So Kristen's suggestion is he's at $10,000, not ARPA money. So that would be, 63, don't do math in public, says Chief Lord. Yeah, 6,300 more than what we have budgeted.
And I think
And I-
that, in the second year that this has been done, 3,700, which is what we budgeted for and what we planned for, and going up to 10 is reasonable. And I agree, not ARPA.
And I think we should probably make it clear that it's a one-time thing, because it's the first
I don't see how
holiday
you
and first big festival.
differentiate between the CVB ask and this, when this is actually driving tourists.
Because the CVB, that's their job, is to drive tourism. And the Doma Black Heritage Museum and the Basketball League and everyone else that's coming to use ARPA funds, their job is not to drive tourism. We're fortunate that tourists come here for those events. But the purpose of the CVB that is their job. That is why I'm okay with the ARPA funding going to the CVB and not for this particular incident, for this particular event. Or any other event, for that matter.
Tiara, are you okay with 10 not using ARPA money?
Yes.
Shelley, are you?
Yeah.
And Kristen was, so that's 3.
And what I see here is a large line item on performance artists, so this tells me they're trying to attract top name entertainers. And so I think that support would offset the cost of higher end entertainment.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what are we doing?
10,000.
Doing 10?
10 non-ARPA, correct?
Right.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we are taking a break until our public hearings at 7 o'clock.